Welcome back to the ELM260 Roboguide demos. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate creating the shapes program, but what I'm going to show you is a way of doing it rather than jogging to the points and recording them manually. I'm going to show you a method of when you know the geometry of a given shape, you can actually enter the points as XYZ coordinates, and it's a more accurate method if you know what the coordinates are going to be. So start up the teach pendant, and so the first thing I'm going to do is, but anytime I start a program, a new program, I need to put the robot into a neutral position. And last time I showed you how to do that by jogging. This time I'm going to show you an easier method. If you go to the data input in a previous lab, now actually it might come up looking like this. When you hit data, it might come up showing registers. And so what we want to see is the position registers. Now in lab 10, you should have created the home, safe, and repair positions. And so I've got a home position here, and if I go shift move to, oops, teach pendant is off. Let's try this again. Shift move to. That's my current home position. Now, that's actually pretty good, but I'm just going to show you something before I move on. If I go to this R and click the position button, I can manually enter in the joint values of my of that position. So I can just type in 0, 0, 0, 0. Now joint 5 I don't want to be 0, I want it to be negative 90, so it's pointing down, and then joint 6 is 0. Then click done, and now if I do a shift move to, it'll just readjust itself a little bit. So that's a perfectly neutral position, and that's always a good place to start. We know that joint 6 is at 0 degrees, so it's not rotated too far. The pointer is pointing straight down, so we're going to, that'll help us avoid getting into singularity. Okay, so that's going to be home position. Let's get started with the program that we're going to write. So I click select, create, and I want to type in a name, so I go options, keyboard, and I'm going to call this shapes, but I'm going to use my initials EEJH because as I create more programs, it'll help keep them alphabetically grouped together. So we just click the edit, and now we're ready to start. All right, so the first thing I need to put in the program are the two commands that define the user and tool frames that are being used. So I'm using tool frame 1 and user frame 1. So over here I just click instruction, forward arrow over to offset frames, and the command I want is user frame number equals, and I click constant, type in a 1, enter. And then same thing here, I click over here, whoops, I got the wrong command, let me try that again. So, all right, forward arrow, offset frames, and now user tool number, constant 1. Okay, so that sets my user and tool frame. The second thing I want to do is I hit the forward arrow here to get over to where I can start recording points. My first point is going to be the home position. So shift point, and it records it as a regular point, but I want it to be my position register point, home position. So I click on top of the 1 where it says point 1, go to choice and click PR, type in 1, that's the the position number for my home position. I also labeled it home, so the label shows up here. So that's going to be my starting point. And so what I'm going to do first is the square program. And I know it's going to start here at this corner. I want to start at that, and that happens to also be the origin of the user frame I created. So one handy way to get to that point, again, I'm trying to save time here. rather than jogging and zooming and going to very fine speeds and doing all that, I've already done all that work in creating my user frame. I did a real nice job spending time getting accurate points. So why not use the points that I created as a starting point, as a good reference? So to do that, I go to Menu, Set Up, Frames. So here are my 3 points, and I can move to any one of these 3. I'm going to move to the origin. I highlight it, Shift, Move to, and it goes right down to that point. Okay, now to get back to my program, the quickest way to do that is to hit the Edit button. Click Edit, I'm back to where I was. And so this is actually going to be this first point in my square. So I go Shift, Point, and now when in the program it started at home position, it's going to move down to this point. I want to keep it as a joint move because it doesn't have to be a straight line, and I always want to use joint move whenever possible. I only use linear moves when I'm wanting to do a straight line. So now what I'm going to do now is actually create the points not by jogging, but by actually entering them in. So I'm going to pause here, and there's a separate presentation that is going to be starting up after I pause that shows how to get the geometry of this shape. Before we go there, I'm just going to show you very quickly how if you have a fixture in Roboguide, if you double click it, it brings up the properties of this fixture. Now it tells me right here, this square shape is 200 millimeters across in X, and it's 200 millimeters in Y, and it's 100 millimeters in the Z direction. So those are the dimensions I'm going to be using when I get my points. So let me just pause the video at this point. Okay, there's actually a separate PowerPoint, actually no, it's a video that goes through the geometry of how to figure out the points here, but I'm going to let you watch that if you need to. But what I'm going to do here is, if we look at this as if we're looking at a graph, now it's tilted, but remember the X direction is this direction, and the Y direction is this direction. And as I mentioned before, the square is 200 millimeters in the X and the Y direction. So my next point is going to be here at this corner. So if you think of this, let me just tilt it up so it's a little bit more, oops, sorry, come on. There we go. So it's kind of straight the way we look at it. So this is the X-axis. So I'm going to enter this as a set of coordinates. This, my origin, the origin of the frame is the 0, 0, 0 point. So this corner is 200 millimeters in X, 0 in Y. So that'd be 200, 0, 0. This corner here is 200 in X and 200 in Y. So it's 200, 200, 0. And this corner here is 0 in X and 200 in Y. So that's 200, 0, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and create those 4 points in the program by just entering numbers. So first thing I'm going to do is I need a linear move. So let me just go back here. If I hit Shift Point, it will record the current point with the default motion. If I hit the point command, I can then pick from the list of motions. So I'm going to pick this one. It's a linear move that I want because I don't need to be a straight line. I want fine termination, so it actually reaches the point and gets to that point before moving on. So I'm going to click that one. I'll change this to 200. 100 is a little too slow, so 200 is good. Okay, now the point right now is where it is right now, but I can go in manually change the value here. Okay, so my next point, point 2, is going to be this corner. Now let me just show you. If I go to point 1 and I click position, you see that's 0, 0, 0. That's where it is right now. The next point is going to be 200 in X and 0 in Y. So all I have to do is click position, type in a 200, okay, and that's 0.2. Then I can teach the next point. Oops, I did it the wrong way. Shift point. All right, 0.3 is this next corner. That's going to be 200, 200. Teach another point, 0.4. That's going to be this far corner. That's going to be 0, 200. And then the last point is going to be back to where I started from, which is 0.1. And then the last thing I'm going to do is go back to home. So that even that one I can do. Now the move to home should be a joint move because there's no reason for it to be a straight line. And then I just choose the position register, type in 1, and there's my home position. All right, so let's go back to the top of the program and we'll put this in step mode and try it out, see if it does what we think it's supposed to do. Shift forward. So it's just right there. It just set the user frame and the tool frame. Now here's the home position. Okay, the first move is move to the first corner. There's one side, there's the second side, third side, fourth side, back to where it started, and then back to home. Now, not sure how that became 2% fine, but I'll change that to 20%. Maybe that's... Okay, so there's my square. I'm going to now try it in, get it out of step mode, and we'll try it in the cycle start mode, make sure it does a nice job of making straight square sides. Okay, so you remember that the accuracy that I have in my user frame was what allowed me to create points by just entering coordinates. And as long as my user frame is accurate, those points are going to be very accurate as well.